Welcome everyone to Politically High Tech with your host, Elias. Well, I'm going to address a certain population here. I'm pretty sure I haven't covered you enough. You don't have to tell me. You can yell in the comment section all you want. Go right ahead. If you want to make yourself feel good, go right ahead. I know I haven't addressed this, and I'm going to frame it in two ways. The Republicans call them the alphabet group. That's more of an insult. And the left, they give too much letters to the point that I'm already bored and drawn out. Get straight to the point. Okay, they both are pretty wrong, in my opinion, as a centrist, independent person. But LGBTQ plus people, I'm just going to say like that. That's mostly getting out of me. That includes everything else. Everything else you're going to add. Pasta, whatever. Green, rainbow skin, whatever. Just put it in there. Plus should just be, to me personally, is good enough. This episode is more for you, especially those who are struggling with suicide, maybe mental health in general. Look, even a lot of heterosexual, asexual, whatever sexual is going through that. Still stressful time. Inflation affects most people except for the rich. Okay, they got their own little problems, but I'm not gonna go there. So this episode is more for you for once, and the past. I praise some of them, and I've criticized some because I go case by case. I don't just say, "Oh, all LGBTQ plus people are demons." And there was even one Republican who was pro LGBTQ plus. Just to give you some nuance, it's not exclusively to Democrat. That's why I brought that guess in years ago. I think it was 3 years ago, going back that far. Just remember that. But all I want to say is this is more for you. I'm going to cut my rambling short. I have a guest here who is, I could say, a psycho expert if you want to add a little flair and controversy to it. But he's a psychologist, really. And he has his experiences that I'm sure is going to speak to you. Okay, heterosexual people, you're going to be left out. Or you could join if you want, be an ally. Join. If not, I can't force you. I wish I could put a gun through the screen and just kind of force you to listen, just increase my listenership. But I can't do that. That's for you, right? I can't do it. Just us. So I have a guest here. I'm just going to call him Dr. Josh. No, not Dr. Oz. Let's keep him out. Okay, I'm not able to talk about the headlines today. I'm sure some of you pay attention to that he's been picked, but we're not going to talk about that doctor. It's about Dr. Josh here. This is more of a mental kind of episode, not, the medical craziness. I'm not in the mood to talk about that today. So, welcome to this podcast. And what do you want the listeners and viewers to know about you?
Well, thank you, Elias. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. So thank you very much for having me. So for your listeners, whether you identify as a queer person, LGBTQ plus, or otherwise, I think really what I'd like people to know about me is that I feel like I was actually put on this earth to assist individuals, groups, and maybe even organizations to find ways of helping people flourish. I say that because from my youngest memories, I recall using storytelling from the Bible. I was brought up in a very religious household, and utilizing those Bible stories, as most people who learned them understand that it's not just about a story itself, it's about what you get out of that story and could apply to your life. And so from my formative years, I have seen the power of storytelling, and I've continued down that line, although I'm not a very religious person, because religion also happens to be one of the conduits by which people like myself have been oppressed. Now, it's not all religion, so I don't want to paint it all in a broad brush. There are plenty of churches and religions that are queer affirming. However, the time I was growing up in the late 70s and early 80s was a bit different than what it is now. And we've come a long way in certain regard. We've also gone backwards, in my opinion, in certain aspects as well. But queer people are not going to go away. We're going to be here forever, for as long as there is an earth and there are people living on it. And so I think it's important not just to understand but to also find ways of helping us and everyone else flourish as well. When you start to look, and I love research because research has shown me so much about the human condition. It is not a panacea for everything. So research does not clear the way and change everything in your life and make it better. But it's a huge component in understanding things. And one of the things I understand is that when you help out the people who are the most oppressed in society, that all people benefit as a consequence of that. So sometimes it might seem a little unfair that people are focused on a particular aspect or subset of society. But the research, like I just mentioned, is very, very clear that that does not really dismiss anyone at all, but in fact, it uplifts all people, because by doing that, you are creating these after effects, or these ripple effects, if you will, where all parts of society actually benefit.
No, yeah, I wish we would stop being paranoid. But, a city like New York, where I'm in, it's one of the few that I could give them A, and that's rare for me to give that kind of school grade. If there's a lot I could criticize about New York City, the rent's too damn high. That kind of comes to like finances of living. I'm giving them a D on that one, but that's a whole other thing for another day. Be clear, they need help, okay? Because even though you have a very small population, right, in general, I mean across the board, like, you still go through a lot of adversity, obstacles like you went through. And I don't mind criticizing religion. I'm more of a spiritualist, because look, we are people, and the LGBTQ people have existed even for a long time. But check in ancient Greece. Documents of homosexuality, even lesbians, okay? Well documented. Check ancient Greece. They existed then, they existed back then, okay? So it's part of the lovely, human, colorful tree, okay? Rather you like it or not. So they've been around, and then, I don't like to use that biblical example because it's more of a horrifying one. The Sodom and Gomorrah is like the big reference that they got there, but I use the ancient Greece one because that one was, I would say, inclusive to some extent. Definitely more than what the biblical example that they have. Sodom and Gomorrah story. Yeah, it's a whole lot of death and destruction, just to put it very short. And even though that wasn't the only thing that was being condemned for, it was being condemned for so much other stuff. Let's just be clear. It's not just an anti-LGBTQ thing. They were just doing a whole bunch of stuff that was considered unholy. So I just want to be clear about that. So, yeah, I think, look, people need help. People in general. People, yeah. And once we get to that space, I think we could flourish so much.
Absolutely.
People. Just people. That's why I think. But it's going to take a while. And I like what you said, because I actually got a question before I get to digging into you a little bit about what U.S. is doing to increase LGBTQ rights and what's doing the opposite. Because two truths can happen at the same time. Sometimes it's state by state level. You know how red states are in general. You know how blue states are in general. This issue, just to be simple. So let me dig into it just a little bit. What made you pursue psychology in general? You probably could have tried Broadway or anything else.
Well, I do love Broadway, and my undergraduate degree was actually in acting in theater. So, like I had mentioned, I fell in love with storytelling, and I wasn't kidding. Like, that is something that I have a huge passion for. But psychology, in hindsight anyway, became like a natural inclination for me, because what I realized was that I had been studying psychology my whole life, although it wasn't like in an official way, but I was studying human behavior, and that's really what the study of psychology is all about. Of course, there are many other aspects to psychology, especially when getting it at the doctoral level, and incorporating research into that. However, the underlying mechanisms or the things that actually were motivating me still motivate me to this day. And it's really about understanding the human experience, understanding why we behave and react and act the way that we do, and then figuring out ways to assist people, whether it be through storytelling or otherwise. to help them flourish. And there are many models out there that do that. But I specifically want to assist people that are queer and or Black and brown because of systemic racism, oppression that has taken place, whether it's within the queer community or outside of it. And that's what really motivates me. I know there's a lot of talk as of late in political circles about this wokeness and, it being an irritant, if you will, and how people are framing it in such a way to where it seems like a really nasty thing. And the way that it's being spun, as I will say it, I think is an injustice in of itself, because if you look at the word wokeness before it became politicized, it really was about just understanding how things are actually working in front of you so that it could help you and other people navigate through systems much better. We look at spaces like the financial services sector, right? Financial services, generally speaking, are meant to keep you spending. So being woke about that just means that you are educating yourself so that you understand that psychology is being used against you in order to keep you in a loop, to keep you spending and spending and spending. And they're spending billions of dollars to do that. So this is not an indictment on the system, because we're all going to spend money. But for some people, and in cases, a lot of people, it works to your detriment, because if you're caught in this loop, if you will keep spending and spending. The junk food industry is another example of that. Well, how is it a bad thing to be woke to the fact that junk food is created in such a way to where it is meant to keep you eating more and consuming more? That is a fact. And by understanding that, that is what can make you feel more woke, or whatever kind of concept or saying you want to use instead of that word woke, because it's been used in such a negative way now and has such a negative sort of connotation attached to it. But wokeness at its very core is not about going around and canceling people. It is not about being an asshole. That has nothing to do with wokeness. Wokeness at its very core, as I understand it and I've been trained, is really about just seeing the truth and being able to navigate through the mess that is given to us on a daily basis. Realizing that and helping yourself through that does nothing but increase your well-being. I think that is so, so important. That is something that psychology has shown me, and it really hurts me. It hurts my heart to hear people using something like wokeness to turn it against us and each other. So now we're arguing over something that truly is beneficial at its core. So I don't care what we call it. We can call it whatever we want in order to get away from this politicization that has occurred. But I don't want us to stop being woke or whatever it is. I want us to be wide awake. And I think that's part of us helping each other. It's like, how many times have you had to unlearn something in your life that you thought was a truism? When you hear things like the flat earth coming back, when there is plenty of evidence to show that we live in a round world. Hello? I also want to be careful, because I don't want to come across as I'm making fun of people who might still believe that way. There's plenty of room for all differences that exist in the world. But this is what my point is. It's like, is believing that the earth is round or flat really going to change your well-being or how you navigate through the world? Maybe, maybe not. There's an argument to be made there. But do we see how by attacking wokeness, we've gotten to a point to where the repercussions of that are a proliferation of people believing in things that have absolutely no value or truth in the real world? And I believe that we've gotten to this place because we're starting to attack things like this, like wokeness, and saying that this is like an agenda that people have to do the very opposite of what it's actually meant to do. I think it's really important for us to take a step back and say, what are we really fighting? And have we fallen into a trap to where we've had the people who have told us these things, they're winning. They're the ones that are sitting back and saying, nah, we're successful. We got them to do what we wanted to. And now they're fighting. And while we're fighting, they get to do whatever they want, because our attention is not on what's happening in the systems. Our attention is on each other and fighting each other over stupid things like, are you woke or are you not woke? Because if you are, then I want nothing to do with you because you're part of the problem. This is what really gets me going, because it's like, there's so much more that we could be concentrating on that's truly going to be bringing us together. I want to have more conversations like that.
No, that's a good point. I mean, this is a good attempt to purify woke. I did study the origin of the word, because it's like where I started picking it up. It was, just be alert of the injustice, systemic injustice, not just, racial, financial, health. Just be alert and even counter that problem, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that was the true origin of that. I didn't tell my listeners that I've used it in a very political sense, because sadly that's one that most people are familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And I use it more tied to the detriment, especially if it goes like trying to cancel people or things like that. I didn't call them out on everything. So no, there's certain things they write about, there's some prejudice and all that. They're not completely wrong about everything. How they're going about it, some things is a bit out of whack. I'm just gonna put it like that. I mean, I like that, and Broadway. Just to say real quick, I am a fan of Broadway too. Broadway is great. I mean, storytelling. I find it even better than movies. Yes, take that, Hollywood. I'll attack Hollywood on that one. Yes, I'm proud partisan. This was a political party. I'm team Broadway. Really, I'll drink even the Broadway Kool-Aid if I have to.
Yeah.
All right, but that's a whole other side thing. Now in terms of LGBTQ.
Yeah. So, I guess we want to look at a political level, like what's happening, from like the White House and the laws that are being made. Well, one of the biggest things, obviously, was the instituting the right for queer people to get married. I mean, I think that's a huge step, regardless of how you or your listeners might personally feel about marriage, generally speaking, whether it should be for people who identify as a man and a woman. And what this really does is kind of turn some of that on its head. So I do understand the lashback that exists when people say, well, my entire life I was taught that gender is a binary. There's male, there's female, and that's it. And that that's what marriage is for. And that's the institution that is usually attached to religion. And, when you spend decades believing that, generations even, it's very difficult to kind of turn that on its head and say, like, that's no longer the case, So I get the lashback. I get this sort of like reaction to it. But I think once, just like anything else that's a major change in our life, once we process the negative emotions, and this is where the psychology comes in, there's an opportunity for us to be able to maybe slowly start to understand why this is important. And for gay people, it really made a difference. It's not just about getting a ring or, a marriage certificate. It's much more than that. It's being seen in the eyes of the law as equal to our straight counterparts. That is extremely important. It doesn't change everything. It doesn't make everything great, but it's a step. It's a huge step in the right direction. And that's progress. That's how I would view what progress is all about. And it's not just about marriage, because not every queer person wants to get married. Just like every straight person doesn't want to get married. Every human being doesn't want to get married and have a family. We're living in a time where the family unit and what a relationship looks like or doesn't look like is much, much different now. Maybe there's an argument like what you were talking about in ancient times, like the Greeks and so on in the Bible times, where maybe this did exist. There's some evidence for that. But all I know is that for whatever reasons, and maybe one major reason is because society, especially here in the United States, had made it very difficult for queer people to actually be out for the longest time. And so when assessments were done at a national level to figure out what the queer population looked like, it usually would be anywhere from 1 to 3%. You fast forward, this was about maybe 10, 15 years ago. You fast forward to now, and you see those numbers have jumped up to like 6, 8%, just depending on the age group. And as a whole, it's closer to like 5%. So that's a pretty big jump for a country with hundreds of millions of people, right? Does that mean all of a sudden there's this huge proliferation of gay individuals? People, is there truly an agenda? I can see the talking points that would support this whole like, oh, so here's the groomers and they're grooming people and they're turning into the realities are anything but that. And this is why psychology is so important and research, generally speaking, is so important. What has actually happened is that we've made it easier for people to come out. So the numbers haven't really changed. In fact, we still think that it's being undercounted because, as you mentioned, we've made progress, but we've also gone backwards. Some of those other things have happened at a local level, which I think is just as important as speaking about the national level. Years ago, we had to have places and spaces that were safe for us. They were usually called like gayborhoods, which still exist in major cities like New York, in South Florida, in the Miami area, Fort Lauderdale, of course, in California, and so on. But one of the great things is that it's not as needed as it used to, although it remains to be seen what's going to happen in the next few years if we're going to have to, go back to some semblance of that. But my point being is that I grew up in a generation where the only option for us to speak to other gay people was to go to a gay bar or gay club. Thankfully, things have changed because not everybody under our umbrella, if you will, does drink or use substances. That's another like misnomer and a negative stereotype of who we are. I myself have been sober since 2013. I'm very happy and proud about that, to have some clarity of mind. Thank you. But my point is that we needed more than just a bar or a club to be able to congregate. And so over time, there have been so many different types of places, if you will, whether they be centers or nonprofit organizations that have different types of activities, whether they be related to alcohol or not. And it's just so much more options. We've come to the point where this is the progress that I talk about. We really don't need to hide as much. We don't need to find these safe spaces as much now. What the fear is with the recent changes on the political landscape is that this might regress us, where we need to go back to those sorts of things. And I hope that's not the case, but by every indication that I can see, I think that perhaps it will be the case. And we will do what we have to do because, like I said at the outset, we're survivors. We've gone through a lot in our life. And as a consequence of that, whether, it's good, bad, and different, what that means is that we have a lot of resilience that's built in to our community. And so this is not going to stop us, even if the goal is to eradicate or make us go back into hiding. We're not going to go away. So I know I didn't talk too much about all the different aspects of progress versus, but I think this is something that people know, even if it's not something that you study or seek out purposefully. We know it because it's been highlighted as of late with a lot of the politicization of LGBTQ plus individuals, especially for our trans individuals that exist under the umbrella. Unfortunately, they have been the ones who have been pinpointed above and beyond the rest of that umbrella. And that's very unfortunate because, again, there's a lot of misnomers, there's a lot of negative stereotypes that are being inserted, and the realities will show otherwise. So we could spend an entire podcast just on that, so I'll stop there. But I think the point is we've lost this ability to really become more proximate to people. And the further away that we are from individuals like trans individuals, and what the research shows is the further away you are from an individual like a trans person, and if you don't have a trans friend, and we're not just talking about, I know a trans person because I saw one at work or something like that. We're talking about having a good relationship with a trans person. If you don't have that in your life, which could be a lot of people out there, then it becomes very, very easy to demonize and to make them subhuman. And once you do that, it is much, much easier to discriminate against them and actually take actions that can actually harm them. And that's the reason why, or part of the reason why, a lot of Black trans women, as an example, get killed. That is a reality. And that's what the statistics show us. Why is that the case? So somebody who's saying, well, it's just rhetoric, it's just people talking and saying, we don't need these trans people because they're confusing our kids and they're making our bathrooms like ridiculous. And it's, they're blowing this thing out of proportion. I don't know about you, but the last time I went to a bathroom, I could care less who was in there. And I've never seen a little kid 6 or 7 years old in the bathroom by themselves. It's usually with a family member. Okay. And when you look into who actually gets molested the most, it's people that are in the family, somebody that is a trusted friend. And I hate to say this because this opens up a can of words. I don't hate to say it, but I will say it. Priests. So when we were talking about who are the biggest sort of like culprits, is it really LGBTQ people? I mean, I know for sure there are LGBTQ plus people who engage in horrific things, because at the end of the day, like we had talked about before we started this podcast, they're people. And unfortunately, although it's a very small percentage of individuals in the world, there are people who do really nasty, stupid things. But they're not just LGBTQ people. They're in all walks of life. And that's extremely important to keep in mind.
Oh, that was well eloquent. Me here, radicalization. Oh, I'm defending even the so-called gay groomer. Do you hear that? If you still heard that, go get help. Maybe he could prescribe you some kind of pill just to alternate whatever mental illness is going upstairs. Okay. It was very rational. It was pretty damn eloquent, in my opinion. And we need more conversations like this because sadly, that one LGBTQ plus person get all the headlines, make it seem all of them do that same act. And I even said it before in a couple of podcasts. Check on learning how to be. I forget the name of the podcast. It's with Dak Mills. Good podcast, by the way. I said, look, straight people are more likely to do heinous acts because it's just simply more of them. There's good and bad in everybody. Okay, just statistically speaking. And you already said priest. I'm not offended by it because I did my research. I came to the same conclusion. Yeah, I was like, yep. And that's why a lot of them is getting exposed. That's why churches are slowly falling apart, because a lot of that's been exposed. So if you get offended by it, I didn't hear him attack God. He's attacking the church as an institution. There's a difference. God is not the church system.
Right. And it's not all priests, right?
It's not all priests. So,
but there's enough of it happening. And as a society, I have yet to hear people getting really upset about that. As a society on a whole, I hear people getting really upset about bathrooms and policing bathrooms and what's in your pants, whether you have a penis or a vagina, and policing that, and whether or not that actually aligns with the gender that you identify with. I mean, at the end of the day, how did we get to this point where it's become so ridiculous? Well, we don't even feel that it's ridiculous, when the actual ridiculousness that's happening out there is being brushed under the rug for the most part. Not everyone is doing that. There are plenty of people out there that are also very upset about the things that are happening, whether it be in religion or, sometimes we hear in the news how it happens in other places outside of religion, where youth are congregating and able to be among a figurehead that is trusted in what was there was one recently where it was from the Olympics where people were getting massages from a very young age. So my point is like, yeah, once we start just really looking at one subset of society, it's like alarm bells need to be rung, because what's actually happened is the same thing as the junk food industry. They got us. They caught us in this trap where that's why I say we got to wake up and call it whatever you will. You don't have to call it wokeness because it's been overused and abused, but figure it out for yourself. I'd say, and it's not about, it's okay to question everything in your life, but that this takes a lot, like to question everything. But there are certain things that there's enough data out there. If you just want to pierce through the silo that might exist because you only get your news or your information from certain sources, challenge yourself. And I that's for both sides. That's just not for one side. That's for our side too. Because we're creating narratives about people on the right as well that are just as bad. We are defaming them. We're saying they're horrible people that just want whiteness to exist. And there's a small subset of that happening, for sure. There are white nationalists, white Christian nationalists that want to change the makeup of our country to look more like them. That is a truism, but that does not mean that every person who votes Republican aligns with that belief. So that's important, because it's too easy to dismiss every Republican or every red state as being hateful assholes. Just like it's so easy to dismiss every queer person and say they're all groomers or whatever. They all have an agenda and whatever else comes with that.
No, yeah, that's great. I think that's a decent segue to the negative. You already have the perception with the politicalization. What are the decrease of LGBTQ rights? I think it's a decent segue to that question. Right? You already talk about the perception and how the media covers like that one, and then of course like it's blanketed towards all. It's the same. It's stereotyping really, and it's like saying all gay people are fashionably great, and you just like you said, party goers with the whole cocaine and drinking and all
Right.
that. So, I could just have like, I don't know, like a lounge or a coffee, or something, something like that. Yeah, people at the end of the day, people. You're more than just the orientation. That's like one part of you, but
right. I think also it's important to understand why we feel this way, because it's easy to think that this is our reality. You have to consciously seek out things that are opposite of that. Research and getting a doctorate, not that everybody needs to do that, but for me, I needed that because I needed the structure. And what it really taught me was one of the first things when you're doing research is that you have a hypothesis. And so you have to be really careful because all human beings have biases. And so when you're seeking out research, what ends up happening, this is a psychological concept that is called a confirmation bias. So what ends up happening is that you're seeking out information that is only confirming what your hypothesis is. And it's not that you're not exposed to all this other information, but you're kind of like automatically, this is happening automatically. So some people are like, no, I don't do this, but it happens automatically. Test yourself, because every time you get like a new car that's a yellow color, you'll now notice that in the road, there's a bunch of yellow cars that are the same model and type as yours. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden a bunch of people started buying cars that are just like yours. It means that now your brain is fixated on finding what's similar out there for a reason, because you set the tone for that by purchasing this car. It's the same thing when we seek out information. We have to be very careful. We have to purposefully seek out information that is counter to what we believe in and what we're seeking, so that we can then make a more concerted sort of observation, if you will, to be like what they call triangulate the information, to be more objective about it. And you can't do it with every single thing because it's sometimes it's virtually impossible. But with the things that are most important that affect other people, where we're treating them differently and actually making laws that could hinder their progress, then I think it's important to then take our time to seek out information that is counter to what we're finding. So that's one thing, but we're starting to see, we talk about like cancel culture as an example. We're starting to see the banning of books happening. And on the one hand, I want to say, like, look, I grew up in a Jehovah's Witness household. That was the religion that I was brought up in. And I was only allowed to read the Bible and any other type of pamphlets or materials that were created by Jehovah's Witnesses. That was all I was able to read. So my parents made sure that I had no contact with any other type of books or materials until I started school. And then they had no choice but to allow me to start to do that. But then I was homeschooled for a little while. And so you can imagine, that gave them some more control. What is my point here? Parents have an option. This happens all the time. What they want to expose their children to, that is their choice. And I think that is fine. Now, the child, as they get older, at the age of 18 or beyond that, and they start to leave the house, then they can start to make their own determination like I did and say, well, thank you for bringing me up in this certain way. I understand why you did it, but now I'm going to venture out there and see what else is. The issue I have is when actions are being created that affect other people outside that household. Nobody has the right to tell anybody else that they cannot allow their children to do this or that. This is the fundamental sort of issue that I have with this sort of activity, whether it's on the left or the right. It's this idea that I have knowledge or behaviors that are better than another human being. And because of that, I now need to force you to do the very things that I have done because it has created me some well-being, whether that's imagined or real or otherwise. That just can't be. It can't. How can we live in a world where we're fighting over who gets to determine how we bring up children under the guise of, well, they're grooming them and they're going to learn this and that and they're going to turn gay, when there's no evidence for that whatsoever? So can we call things out for what it is? Can we just say that when you're banning books, it's not for the betterment of children? It's really because of control, and because what you want for your children, you also want for every other child out there. And that's not America.
No, that's really anti-American. Freedom of choice, that's a big violation of that. And that's why I've been consistent on the record. I've criticized DeSantis. I mean, even certain educational stuff was banned on that list. I say, what? A dictionary? Are you kidding me? Okay, so you're going to have them talk blah, 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 to like freaking middle school. Great. Don't be surprised if their vocabulary is no better than a 5-year-old going into middle school. Okay? So, it's, no, and you know what? People like me who have dealt with certain bans, I just find another way. I tell them, find another way. Dance around it. They only banned it one stream. There's other streams. Be creative. I tell parents, just be creative. There's something called the internet.
Right.
Okay? There's a lot more options in there, and you can even order the book, rent it out, whatever. Just find a way to do it. And these bans are very ineffective. I won't be surprised if they were ineffective. And to be quite honest, I'm going to say like it is. It's freaking stupid. It's just dumb. And that's what I criticize the right on that. So look, kids, I can understand certain restrictions. Let the parent be the authoritarian until they turn to a certain age.
Right.
And then, just like, user age, the Jehovah's Witness, I'm sure you toss a lot of that stuff out as soon as you're ready to get out. I won't be surprised. I think this is good. I know I'm going to bash Jehovah's Witness people. I'm sure they're going to hate me, and I'm fine with it. I can live with it. I've dealt with hate, and I'm fine with it. Sometimes I even embrace it. I think that's my sick part of me. Sometimes I embrace it. Yeah, come at me. I like it. But I'm going to say for the Jehovah's Witness, y'all the most miserable religious people I've ever met. I one time scared one of them off to say, you know what's my next door neighbor's number? 666-666-6666. Oh, they ran off.
Oh,
I troll them because I really can't stand. I just can't stand it. And to me, the whole thing doesn't make any sense. Well, if you're Jehovah's Witness, change. I urge you to change. I'm being proud about it. I don't care. You can call me a Jehovah's Witness hater. I'm fine with it. I'm actually fine with it. I don't mind wearing the double horns for you. You can even do a filter, take this clip, they have the double horns on me. I'm fine with it. I don't
Yeah.
care. If it
Well,
gets me more popular and spread the message unintentionally, great. I'm for it.
well,
Because
I completely understand where you're coming from. Sorry if I'm cutting you off
no,
there.
go ahead. No, go ahead. I'm just
I um I also like the point you made earlier about how do we hold like two seemingly disparate, you didn't say these exact words, but things in our lives and still kind of like function, like and still remain like it's okay. It's all right that these two things can occur simultaneously. And I think, religion generally speaking, but especially now, we've brought up the Jehovah's Witness thing. For people who are embedded in it, and it's not all people, but a good percentage of people who are in it and continue to be in it year after year, and they continue to tell themselves that this is exactly the route that they want to be in. It's because whether it's perceived or otherwise, they're actually getting something out of it. And they feel like their well-being is being increased. When you look at the mainstays or the universal themes of religion, like bringing people together, singing, the prayer, the community, there's a lot of good aspects. The things that are taught, again, that are universal about treating people with respect. And there's so many aspects of that. Really, there are plenty of things to squeeze out that can actually help us flourish. Now, does that necessarily mean that we need to join that religion? Perhaps not. I mean, I'm one of those examples where I'm more of I'm not a religious person, but I am a spiritual person. That's how I view myself. But my point is, like, here's where the duality comes in. I think it's important for people to understand that the very thing that might bring you or you determined to be a potion, let's just say if you're drinking something and it just feels great and it's a wonderful feeling, of course you want to pass that on to other people. Of course you want to share that. What's important to keep in mind and remember is that very thing that you feel is a potion when other people drink it could be their poison. And we need to respect that. So the Jehovah's Witness religion was a poison for me because it taught me at a very young age that I did not belong on this earth. And when I internalized that, I hated myself. And I did things in my life that were horrible for me. And I ended up in a deleterious cycle that almost killed me in many different ways. So is that the outcome that we want for individuals, or do we want them to thrive? So once we realize that the very potion that we have is a poison for someone else, we got to stop trying to cram it down their throat. And this applies outside of religion as well. I think it's really important to acknowledge both. And that goes for people like myself who have been harmed and hurt, that I can still acknowledge that my family is still belonging, for the most part, still belong as Jehovah's Witnesses. And I can still love them and disagree, and they can still love me and disagree, and we can still function. We need to get back to that, because I can still talk to someone who disagrees with being gay or being queer. But when did we get to the point that we are going the extra mile now to stop people from flourishing, to stop people from being their authentic selves? It's gotten out of hand. And that has nothing to do with wokeness. Absolutely nothing. It has everything to do with viewing people as subhuman. Because once we start to view them and see them as humans, just like we are, then we will not have the capacity to treat them any differently. We will have just as much love for them as we do for ourselves and other people that think and act and believe the same as we do. Except the difference is they don't. They don't believe, act, and think the way we do. So what? And we got to get away from this whole thing that they're harming our children. We need to focus on the people who are truly harming our children.
Yep. I mean, you said it well, and I even said it a few times here and there, and I think I'm going to link into that podcast, give that podcast another, I think it was learning to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's the name of the podcast. I'm going to share the link, okay? I'm mixing things up. I'm having a boomer moment, okay? The link will tell you more clearly than I can once I'm fully alert of all of that, because I talked about that. I said straight people are more likely to commit these kind of things. I'm not against them, but let's just do basic math, human math. We gotta have mathing. It was like the cool kids said. And, LGBTQ plus worse, they're like 0.0001%. Do you really want to focus on that? Oh, there's like the 30% here or 20% here that's far more significant that's doing damage. Trans bathroom thing, I actually have more of a slightly nuanced opinion, excuse me, about that. I was actually afraid by when the trans person actually went to the same bathroom that my mom was in. But I didn't react. As I said, as long as she didn't say anything, I'm going to keep it cool. I'm just very protective of her. That's just my instinct.
Yeah.
And, and even people who looked off too, even like there was like 2 women that they were off to us. Okay, now I was a little concerned. This is at being to New York. I'd expect to see that. Like in New York City, I would expect that. It's okay, but of course, I'm fine with that because most of them are not going to do anything. Most they're going to do is probably just curse, have a sassy. Okay, great. That's just words. We could brush off and move on. But but that one I was actually afraid because to your point, I don't have that much experience talking with trans people. That was before. Now, since I have a couple of experience talking to them, and I don't know them, I'm not friends with them. They're like anybody else. They just went through a change, or they acting like more than how they identify as, and now all of them have the money just to surgically change completely. Some does it halfway, some do 10%, whatever. Right. I have learned how to humanize them as opposed to putting them as an other, as a threat. Well, because I think the right wingers has got to me a little bit because that's what they jammed in my throat, especially that bathroom incident. All right. Okay. Right. Okay. There I call myself. So wait a minute. Did he do something wrong to my mom yet? No. So I'm going to cop that.
Right. It's preying on our worst fears. And I hate to keep saying this, but if we kind of like wake ourselves up from that, then we realize, wait, the realities are, of course, there are opportunities for people to be harmed and hurt in any sort of space, but let's look at the realities of walking into the bathroom and using the bathroom in a public space. The overwhelming majority of the time, people are going there to do their thing and they want to get out as soon as possible. Nobody wants to, at least having a typical mindset where, you haven't had any brain damage or something. You're not in there wanting to smell the smells of a public bathroom for too long. You're in, you're out. You're not like peeking around to see like, what does that person look like behind the stall? What is this person next to me? Do they really have, it's like this whole, it's like, that's not the reality of it. You don't need to be a researcher to understand that. All you need to do is live on this earth for a couple of decades to know that that's the bathroom experience, right? It's like, especially in crowded, busy places. So it's like, all right, so now we understand that somebody or some entity or group of people have gotten to us. They've actually encapsulated us and put us into the system. That's why I go back to the junk food thing. And don't think that you're an exception to this, that this system was meant to get you going, whether it's to get you really excited about something and want to buy a ticket for a football game, whether it's to get you really angry about something so that you vote a certain way, whether it's to get you not satiated enough so you need more and more of that junk food. All of it comes from a system that is intentional to work a certain way in their favor, not in yours.
Yep, no, exactly. And, and it's a good thing I caught myself at the very last minute because I was very, very close. I want to do something, but I told myself, no, this person didn't do any harm. I'm reacting to an imaginary threat. I caught myself the very last way and said, wait a minute, what am I doing? Man, I'm the one talking about critical thinking and be self-aware, regardless of who it is. I said, oh no, I call myself, no, I've been put to that trap. I said, no, I need to unlearn that. I need to then I quote myself. I said, no, I got to treat them as fellow human beings. I said, this is kind of going against what I've been saying. I'm not the most left-leaning, right-leaning person. I'm more in the middle at the end of the day. But still, I think we need to treat people as human beings. Some people on the right are waking up to that. The far right, they're far gone. Like that. We can forget about those. But I'm sure there's some people on the right I'll say disagree more civilly, at least
Right.
worst case scenario, but best case scenario is just have them change on at such, having such vitriol just because they look different and they have a lifestyle that we can't wrap our heads on just because it's not our lifestyle.
Right.
Yeah.
And let me share with you a tidbit about psychology that has been very helpful for me. The power of suggestion. And this also is not in psychology circles, also an acting thing. Anything repeated over and over again becomes a reality, period. That is a fact. Whether it's a self-affirmation that you tell yourself, it could be a negative or positive thing, you make that your reality. And so when you have pundits and people in politics who consistently, and it's not just them, so they have like a whole machine of people all spouting the same thing, the same talking points. The more it's repeated, the more it becomes your reality. And then some people might think to themselves, well, come on. I mean, these are just words and how are they affecting me? It can't be that dramatic. Well, think about this. I mean, there are studies that have been done that show the effectiveness of just the power of suggestion happening in the power of threes, because a lot of things happen in threes when it comes to not just psychology, but a lot of things in life. And real quick, I'll give you the example. You wake up in the morning, you look at yourself in the mirror, you might even give yourself a little affirmation, say, I feel good, I had a good rest, and now I'm off to work. You get there, and the first person looks at you and says, are you okay? Simple question. They may not mean much about it, but immediately you start questioning the very realities that you had that morning just by one person suggesting otherwise, even if it's not a direct suggestion. Just the question, are you all right? The second and third time that it happens, second time might be like, hey, you look a little tired. Is everything okay? The third time might be like, hey, are you feeling all right? What ends up happening, and this is just like it doesn't have to be 3 times. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. But the point is that by the third time, a lot of people actually start to feel a visceral reaction to where you might even feel sick to your stomach. Now just think about that. That is a reality, no matter how strong you are, no matter, oh, these are just words. You're a human being. And that is psychology that can be used against you. Now, when people are doing it at work, they probably more than likely don't have an agenda in place. But imagine that happening day after day, year after year. How are you going to fight that? See, once you realize what's going on and what's happening, you can now do something to counter it. But if you're just living your life and thinking, well, no, it's anything but that. No, this is just the realities that are being spouted to me every single day by all these different people. And they're all saying the exact same thing. They're not talking points. These are facts. It's easy to fall into that for anybody. If you're a human being, this is why I go back to you need to question. You need to say, where are these facts? How do I bring in some rationality to this? Because it seems very emotional to me. Why are they all spouting the very same thing? Is there an agenda here? And again, on both sides, we need to do this. It is a fruitful exercise because at the very end of the day, especially if it's affecting people, we need to really question that and say, what is going on here? Is there something, we talk about the gay agenda, but is there an agenda that I'm actually a part of that I may not even realize or know about? So I think it's important, the power of suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to label like that was the right-wing agenda. Okay, I'm just going to label like this. It was the right-wing agenda. I mean, they got agendas too. That's, Lao is not on the left. That's complete. That's partisan talking point bullshit. I'm just being completely fair. I mean, yeah, I really caught. I'm happy that I caught myself right at the very last second. If I did, I would have kept looping. Habit. You already said it. If you can't fight something, just keep repeat. Subconsciously, it was repeated. They get that because wherever we watch absorb, it goes on subconscious. There's no any difference between reality and fiction.
Absolutely.
So I think even that, even just keep repeating, oh, I can fight off. No, but your subconscious absorb as if it's truth.
Right.
We already said the flat Earth. Okay, truth because they're repeated. Or the moon landing was fake. They throw another one in there. So
it's also helpful because when you're outside of that bubble and you hear people spouting things that they think are truths, but we understand them not to be truth, because we can see with our eyes that, it's definitely, there's data to support that that's not the case. We can lead with more understanding and love, because we understand that we're not better than them because we can see the light. We are just not clouded in this sort of agenda, or whatever you want to call it. We've been able to see things, but we're just as prone, because we're human, to falling into those traps. It may not be with the earth being flat as an example. Maybe that's just super obvious, but there are more nuanced things in life that are not so obvious and maybe don't have as much data that we know of, or that is publicly accessible for whatever reasons. And so we just rely on the easiest thing, which is usually nowadays a bunch of pundits or political figures telling us how we should think and act. And really, this is becoming more and more dangerous, because it's not helping us as communities and as Americans to really be brought closer together. What it's doing is just in service of what they want to do, is to gain more power, money, and whatever else comes with that. So I think that's important, and it's happening. Again, I know I've said this a few times now, but it's happening on the left and the right. One last thing I want to say is, when I was younger, in my late teens, I would straighten my hair. I have very curly hair and brown eyes, and I would get contacts that were blue or green. And if you would ask me at the time, like, what are you doing? Are you trying to whiten yourself? I would be like, screw you. What are you talking about? No, I just, this is style. This is what I'm trying to do. In hindsight, though, that's exactly what I was doing. I was taught from a very young age that my color, my background, who I was not sufficient, was not the right thing. And a lot of that was through messaging and mass media and at a societal level. And I internalized that. So I could not be gay. I had to practice being straight. And the more I tried to practice that, the worse off I was, because I was not being true to my inner self. I had to straighten my hair because curly hair was kinky and nasty, and it wasn't as beautiful as straight hair is, which is a total farce, right? My curly hair is just as beautiful as any other type of hair, and that brown eyes were ugly, like the color of crap, and that I needed to have, in order to be taken seriously and make it in the world, I needed to have lighter eyes. And so I would figure out ways, how ridiculous is all that? But during that time, that's how I was operating. Now, not all people, react that way. That was the way that I processed it. But a lot of people do process it in different ways, whether it's just purely internalizing it or externalizing it, as I started to do with actually trying to change not just who I was inside, but also the way that I presented myself. Think about that. It's like, do we really want to put people into that position to where they feel like they have to acclimate themselves in a way to, otherwise that's the only way they're going to survive? And, if everybody thought and acted the same, we'd have a really boring world. You think about all the times you've interacted with people who are different than you, and it's become such a wonderful and beautiful thing, because you realize that there are different ways to look at the world. There are different ways to create happiness and thriving and success, and it doesn't all have to look one way. I think that's such an amazing part of who we are here in America. That's what I yearn for, is just more of that, and just embracing the differences that actually take place, and not trying to just fit everybody into a nice, neat little box. And even if I don't understand why someone is the way that they are, how they've gotten to that place, it doesn't really matter. Again, as long as they are not harming other people or forcing their ways upon other people, then I'm fine with any of those differences existing. I can still thrive and allow those other people to do the same. We don't need to be at odds with each other. And I so desperately want more of that in this world.
We need that. You said, things are very eloquent. It wasn't, far left talking points. I mean, I could detect that from a mile away. These are very just rational, grounded, points. It's something that people with a rational brain will agree with, but if their brain is damaged, I mean, you can't expect much from them. They're probably going to think we're spreading nonsense, and that's fine. Look, I don't expect to attract every single viewer. Trust me, I want great people who could at least think, be self-critical, And that's not easy because it could just be automatic, just be like, curly hair ugly. Curly hair ugly. I want to dye my hair blonde. I want green eyes, and I want to bleach my skin. I'm really that's extreme. Sadly, a certain celebrity has went through that extreme. Except with minus the, dyeing the hair and eye change. If you don't know who that is, MJ initials. Might give you any more hints after that. All right. So yeah, no, I think just to your point, we need to get to a place where we can all thrive. So once we're not harming or forcing, I could agree with that, and that's been my point. And I'm critical about that. I'm definitely more critical of straight people because there's a lot more of them involved. So they're most likely to get the higher, statistically speaking. Just using numbers. I'm not a math person or whatever. Let me wrap this up because I know you gotta go. So any shameless plug you wanna add besides your book? Let me share your website right now. I need to know this. Like, if you want research and even empowering, especially if you have a non-for-profit business with some great solutions, go to drjosh.solutions. It's not a .com, drjosh.solutions. The link will be in the description. And there's also a book out on they really came out, right? I'm assuming it did.
Yes.
That I Am Not Dead, ellipses, 3 dots, yet. Pretty provocative title, my opinion. Maybe it makes me want to get it. Maybe you want to get it. How he overcame his personal adversity. It's inspiration, especially for those who are marginalized, who have a normal, traditional lifestyle. There's a way. There's a way. There's a way for you. Just because you don't fit into the society's way of thinking or traditional way of thinking, it doesn't mean you're a mistake. You just got to carve your own path. And, he is a great inspiration to all of you with that. So that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm definitely not giving you spoilers and none of that. Look, I'm a capitalist. Give me some money, okay? I'm a shameless capitalist and that. Yeah, I'm not gonna do that, okay? Definitely talk more, especially on the LGBTQ and psychology. So there's definitely a lot of things we could talk about. It's a very broad stroke that we can have. I have a lot of ideas, but comment section activity. If you love it, hate it, comment, disagree, comment, give at least a very good reason why. Maybe something I said, maybe something he said. It's probably more from my end. I'm a little more controversial radical, especially with the Jehovah's Witness. I'm sure I'm going to get hate on that. I'm fine with that. And, and I'm pro cat. So the dog owners are going to hate me too. That's fine. But seriously, add value to the discussion as well, because they need help as well. They're not like, they're not evil people, or they're not super privileged like the woman to think. Children nobody more in the middle. So, alrighty then. So, from whenever you start listening to this podcast, you have a blessed day, afternoon, or night.